Now we'll be discussing handle configuration changes. So some device configurations can change during runtime, such as screen orientation, keyboard availability, and when the user enables multi-window mode. Screen orientation can change if the user decides to start looking at your app in a different orientation. Let's say they were using it in a portrait mode earlier, now they want to look at their mobile phones in a landscape mode. In that case, this configuration will change. Keyboard availability, you might want to, there could be a situation wherein users are not using their keyboards while they are using your app. For example, in case of Facebook, your users don't keep typing all the time, right? A lot of times they're just looking through the different friends that they are seeing on their walls, right? So the keyboard availability might change, and also it can change when multi-window mode is there. So this is something which was introduced some 2 versions back, wherein you can have 2 apps running simultaneously at the same time. So in all these cases and a lot of other cases, you will see that the configuration needs to change for the activity that is running, right? Now in such cases, the methods that are associated with activity lifecycle, which we are going to discuss later when we discuss uh, the core topics which are mentioned here. So when we talk about activities, you will see that there are all these methods that are coming in picture in the activity lifecycle. So not to worry if you don't understand this completely as of now, but I will give you some idea of what is happening here. So whenever there is a configuration change, the Android system that is taking care of your app, ultimately it calls different methods depending upon the stage on which your activity is, right? So there are methods like on destroy, on create, on resume, and couple of others. So these methods will be called and the configurations will be set as per the called methods. To properly handle a restart, you can make use of another method which is on save instance state. So what this method, again we will discuss it later, but what this method does is it lets the Android developer decide, or rather save the instance at which the configuration changed. So let's say the user is using the app in a portrait mode and suddenly they change the mode to landscape. They tilt their phone and start looking at your app in the landscape mode. Then at that point in time, your app should be saving the instance, or should be saving whatever is being done up till now in the portrait mode, and now it has to be shown in the landscape mode. So at this point in time, you can use the method on save instance state, because the activity will itself call this method. This method will be called automatically by the Android system, and in this method you can make all the changes or save all the changes that need to be changed, right? You can also make use of view model objects. We will look at them later, and when we discuss saving UI states in the later topics. Now, you might encounter a situation in which restarting your application and restoring significant amounts of data can be costly and create a poor user experience, right? So in such a situation, you have 2 other options. One is retain an object during configuration change, which basically means that you allow your activity to restart when a configuration changes, but carry a stateful object to the new instance of your activity. Another one is handle the configuration change yourself. So this is where you let the system UI, Android system does all the work, and this is where you try to do things on your own. Now this is something which is not very much recommended, because it requires you to actually code a lot. It requires you to preserve everything, because now you are taking control of things in your own hands. So you will have to be responsible for all the changes that are going to happen. Your app will receive a callback when the configurations do change, so that you can manually update your activities as necessary, right? Now let's talk about these 2 topics in little more detail. Now the first one is retain an object during configuration change. Like I said, there will be this method which will be called whenever there's a configuration change, and you can use a class known as bundle, which lets you create objects that you can use to save all the everything that you want to save, and you want to you reuse it when the new configuration is shown on the screen. Just remember the example of portrait to landscape. So when the user tilted the phone from portrait to landscape, this method will be called, and you can use this class to create objects which can store all the current values and save it in the while the on save instance method is called, right? You can also use view model objects, because in some situations you might want to actually retain data which is not possible to be retained through on save instance. Like for example, bitmaps and all, they cannot be saved, or they cannot be transferred from portrait to landscape. So in that case you can use view model objects. Again, we will discuss it later. Now the other thing is handling the configuration change yourself, which is the second option that we had here. So there's a caution which is being given here. Handling the configuration change yourself can make it much more difficult to use alternative resources, because the system does not automatically apply them for you. So any resource that you're using, you will have to bear the entire responsibility of its usage. And here is a small example of how you can handle the such a scenario. For example, in one of the activities that you have created, the name of the activity is my activity, and the configuration changes, as in you are basically telling the system that this is the configuration which has to be watched by the system. So if there is any change in orientation, or there is any change in keyboard, this pipe which you see here, this is called a pipe, and this basically is used to mention multiple configuration changes that you want to mention. So you are telling system UI that Android system, that whenever there is a change in these two parameters, then please consider it as a configuration change. And in such a case, you can use the methods, you can override the methods which are on configuration changed, and you can do whatever you want to do with those new changes, right? For example, it is mentioned here, if new configuration orientation is landscape, then you can do whatever you want. For example, they have just displayed a toast message. What is a toast message? Again, we will discuss this later, but toast message is nothing but, I'm sure you must have seen this, it's a small message which appears at the bottom end of the screen, and you must have seen this, which has a black or grayish background with white text written over it. It just comes up for 1 or 2 seconds and then it vanishes, right? So that's about it. I just wanted to give you a brief glimpse of what all is possible through in different case scenarios when you are handling the configuration changes. Now, as we have been seeing that there are a lot of topics which keep coming in that require us to know a lot more about core topics, which we have been avoiding, or we have been just postponing them. So from next video onwards, we will start dealing with the core topics, and somewhere in between we will decide, whenever we find the right time, we will come back to these topics, the remaining topics, because these topics like localization, complex XML resources, they can be understood without knowledge of core topics, but that's not advisable. So let's go to our core topics now, explore a couple of these core topics, and then when we are done with the basics of a couple of them, then we will be coming back to the remaining topics here in App Basics. Alright, then let's meet in the next video. Subscribe to the channel and let me know if you have any questions that we might have not covered, or you think are important to be discussed. Alright, take care, bye bye.